Hi people, Levi here. I want to talk a little bit about the meanings of the signs, but more in the context of what is given in Jaimini Upadesha Sutras as the effects of the Svamsa falling in the signs or the Rashis, and given in Brihat Parashara Horashastra under effects of Karakamsha. So I'll be talking quite a bit about the signs, and perhaps you will find some meanings here that you haven't heard before, and this broadens your perspective. What is the Svamsa? In previous video about the meanings of the houses, I touched on the Atmakaraka. That is the planet with the highest degree in the horoscope, excluding Rahu, Ketu, and the outer planets. Atma means soul, and Karaka means producer, so it's the soul producer. In Vedic astrology, the planets are called grahas. Grahas means seizers, so they seize your mind. The Atmakaraka is the planet that is most intimately involved with your soul's maturation process in this lifetime, and it is the planet on which the whole Jaimini analysis is based. You see, the planets in the horoscope represent the conscious forces of the chart, and the houses represent the unconscious aspects of the chart. So the planets are the astral forces within your consciousness, right? So it makes sense to assign a planet to your soul's maturation process because, you know, it's grahas, it's conscious entity. And it's very valuable, and you will find it, you know, highly accurate to look at the horoscope from this perspective, you know. The Atmakaraka's sign placement in the Navamsha or the D9 chart is the Svamsa. Sva means self and Amsha means division. So the self division. Amsha, when used in an isolated context, so when there's no number in front of it, refers to the Navamsha. The Svamsa is the core challenge that leads to a person's well-being and happiness, and it is extremely important in determining the core character and nature of a person. The effects of the Svamsa are largely related to animals, so this may literally mean that, you know, the actual effects you know, may have to do with an animal, but more often than not, this is going to play out on a level, you know, that the animal represents symbolically, of course. We're doing Jaimini astrology here, and so we're going to use a different set of aspects called Rashi Drishti. Rashi means sign and Drishti means aspect. In Western astrology, we use Tajika-based aspects like the trine, the square, the sextile, etc. We're not going to use those aspects, nor are we going to use planetary aspects, which are based on degrees. For example, Jupiter aspects 5th, 7th, 9th place from itself, Saturn 3rd, 7th, and 10th, and Mars 4th, 7th, and 8th. We're not going to use those aspects either. We're going to use sign-based aspects. So Rashi aspects are based on direction, in fact. We're going to look at the influences to the Atmakaraka in the natal chart and the influences to the Svamsa. So, and this is going to, you know, be determined by a Rashi aspect. So when there's gentle aspects influencing the Atmakaraka and the Svamsa, this will indicate a maturation process that is more gentle and, you know, that goes with more ease. When there's malefics aspecting, you know, the road will be tougher. But the soul, you know, will mature in any case, you know, anyhow. So what are Rashi aspects? It's very simple. Movable signs, movable signs aspect fixed signs, except the fixed sign next to it. Fixed signs aspect movable signs, except the movable sign next to it. And the dual signs aspect each other. So Aries aspects Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. But it's not going to aspect the fixed sign next to it, which is Taurus, right? And then the fixed sign Taurus will aspect Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, but it's not going to aspect the movable sign next to it, which is Aries, and so on. And so the dual signs aspect each other, so Pisces aspects Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius, and so on. So I think that is probably enough for the introduction here. So I'll be discussing the effects of the Svamsa for each sign. I also want to mention that I'm following Ernst Wilhelm's translation of Jaimini Upadesha Sutras, which I think is accurate and deep. So we'll start with the Aries sign. Spring is here, right? So talk to you soon. Thank you. Now the effects of the Svamsa falling in Libra. Jaimini says, in Libra, trade. And Parashara says, in Libra Navamsha, the native is a merchant skillful in making garments. So Libra gives the capacity for trade, right? Now it doesn't mean that because you have a talent with a merchandise that you necessarily have to be a merchant, right? Or to become a merchant. It just points to the ability, the capacity to give up something of lesser value for something of greater value, right? And we know that Venus rules Libra, right? And Venus has to do or represents our self-value, the measurement by which we allow things in and block things out, right? Things that are good for you, that are good for your organism, for your environment, right? For the people around you, good Venus, right? Good Svamsa, or nicely aspected. And you know, when there's malefic aspects to the Svamsa, and also look at Venus condition, this could indicate, you know, some lessons to learn concerning this, right? So self-value has to do with, is all about making the right choices, right? And so Venus is the diplomat, okay? So diplomats go, you know, out of the country to seal deals with other countries, right? To make the kingdom a better place. And that is what Venus does. So Venus is a very practical planet, and so Libra is a very practical sign. So, you know, this, and the core challenge is this, right? Has to do with yours. It is becoming healthy in the choices you make, making healthy choices, right? And we see here the connection with the opposite sign, right, which is Aries, and that also had to do with making the right choices, right? Sometimes there the small things could, you know, be looked at as much more important than they really are. So there it's about giving up the smaller things to be able to accomplish the bigger goals in a person's life, okay? So they're opposites, but they carry a similar meaning, but from different, looked at it from different angles, two extremes, we could say. So now Parashara says in Libra Navamsha the native is a merchant skillful in making garments. Now actually in Jaimini, Mercury is the one that is the planet that is associated with artists and craftsmen, right? And also maker of cloth or of garments. And so there's a little difference here. And when I look at people's horoscopes, like for artists, you know, painters, etc., I definitely look at Mercury, and Mercury does well. Now, Venus represents the work of art itself, right? That's why it, you know, pleases the senses also. But the one making the work of art is Mercury. Now, some general ideas, meanings about Libra sign is that it is an air sign, right? It is a Vaishya. It's a merchant. All air signs are, right? So again, this has to do with trade. It represents the west direction. It is a movable sign, right? So it has to do with action and initiative. It is a Rajasic sign. Again, you know, Venus is a Rajasic planet also, right? So it has to do with desires, and Rajas means mist, right? So desires that can be fruitful or, you know, unfruitful or not fruitful. And so, you know, again, here we see the importance of making the right decisions. It is, you know, represents a medium body, Also, it represents the lower waist, the kidneys, and the internal parts of the sexual organs, right? We know that Venus also rules sperm. And then also it is associated with bazaars, merchant houses or places, and markets. Okay, now if you see, malefic influence to the Svamsa, um, doesn't mean that you're doomed or anything, right? It's not like this in astrology. It's not a static thing, but it will just point to some challenges concerning this, especially if the Swamsha, is Libra for you, then this could play out concerning all the things we discuss here, right? About value and all Venusian things, right? Venus is the planet that makes sure that the energetic system, right, the body, and the energetic system of the body is able to refuel, to relax, right, in order to find the strength and the breath, the air to step up again and deal with the world, the kingdom, right? Trying our best in making the world a better place. And so Venus is very important for this, right? That's why Venus is associated with all these luxuries and things that please the senses. And so this all will also play out in Libra. We know that Libra is a sign of relationships, right? And in fact, Libra is one of the most extreme signs. Relationships can go up and down, right? It is there where the sun is debilitated, okay? So consistency and can be, a challenge, and self-value, right? Like feeling a king, feeling the queen, right? Feeling your own authority. So all these signs obviously are connected, right? And they have their own dimension and their own accents, but they all work as a holistic, wheel, we could say. And so Venus is about self-value, okay? Right, I think I could go over the the elements here and see the fire. Fire is the east, right? And the fire signs are the Kshatriya signs, the warrior signs. They have to do with strength and will and our true self, right? Fire has to do with inspiration. The earth signs are the represent the south and are the Sudras, the laborers, right? So they have to do with practical life and material goals, right? And then the air signs represent the west and are the Vaishyas, the merchants, right? So they have to do with concepts, ideas, are more intellectual, right, and interactive. And then we have the water signs that represent the north. They are the Brahmins, right, the priests, and they have to do with knowledge and contemplation, emotions, diving deep, right? Okay, so I think that is enough for Libra Swamsha. Let's move on to the next one, which is an intense one, Scorpio Swamsha. And now the effects for the Swamsha falling in Scorpio. Gemini says, Scorpio, demons, water, serpents, and serpents here are related to Vishnu, and deprivation of that contained in the breast. And Parashara says, in Scorpio Navamsha there is fear of snakes and harm to the mother's breast. So Scorpio has to do with fulfilling that great need, right? Demons are symbolic for, psychological sensitivities, or persons that are psychologically sensitive. And, when afflicted, it could indicate invasions of psychic disturbances. Or it could indicate psychic abilities, great psychic abilities. All right. Now, water has to do with spiritual growth. Right, we discussed this for Cancer Svamsa. So when afflicted, it could, or it could indicate water-related accidents in rare cases. But water has to do with balancing out emotional and psychological imbalances. Okay, so the water signs are the moksha signs, right? And moksha means liberation. So they are the signs that have the greatest spiritual potential, right, compared to other signs. Then Jaimini says serpents. And here serpents are related to Vishnu, because Vishnu also represents spiritual potential, right? And so it can indicate a very spiritual person. We know that serpents and snakes are symbolic for transmutations, right? Transmuting one's needs, or needs that just are not fulfilling, needs that lead to no peace of mind and no comfort, right? So it's a life dedicated and a focus on those things, right? On transmuting what is old, right? What is not soothing, what is not helping the soul on its path. Also, the serpents are symbolic for the symbolic for the Kundalini energy, right? The energy that rises up the spine. And so this can play out as great spiritual potential, right? But it can also, indicate great destructive possibilities. Okay. See, Alice Bailey, who was a contemporary of Carl Gustav Jung, wrote 23 books on esoteric subjects. Also, she wrote a treatise on full moon meditation. She wrote a book about esoteric healing and the atom, and very interesting lecture. And she talked about the 7 cosmic rays, of which there are 3 main ones. And the first has to do with strength and will. The second with love and wisdom, and the third, she says, is related to active intelligence. So it's 3 qualities of light here, and then there's 4 sub-rays, which I won't go in here, but see, Kundalini energy more has to do with the fires of your personality, we could say. It's not necessarily connected with the high and light, we could say, or with your divine consciousness necessarily. You see, it can play out either way, and that is, we know that Scorpio is a sign of changes, right? Of it's very unpredictable, right? It is the original 8th sign. The 8th house is very. It's very hard to predict events, related to the 8th house. Sudden ups and downs, breaks, extremes, right? Taboo things that are under the surface. And so, for example, I have 2 examples here. Paramahansa Yohananda had his Svamsa in Scorpio. He was at Makaraka moon, and moon fell in Scorpio sign in Navamsha, with only a Rashi aspect of Saturn from its own house, from Capricorn, I think. And so this person just went to the spiritual top, we could say, top of the mountain, to find enlightenment, and did a great job for the world and humanity. But then we have also Hitler. Adolf Hitler had his Svamsa in Scorpio. So you can see how these 2 extremes here play out here, right? It can be very spiritual, and but also very destructive. And serpents the Kundalini energy are associated here. Okay. Then Jaimini says deprivation. He says deprivation of that contained in the breast. So this has to do with the mother's nourishment, right? We know that moon is debilitated in the sign of Scorpio, right? And the moon represents the mother and our, you know, emotional, personal fulfillment and our capacity for renewal and, adaptation. And so it could, indicate that the person was not breastfed, but but it in essence it means that there was a lack of mother's nourishment. Maybe the mother was not around. Maybe she struggled with her own demons and was not able to provide for proper care and warmth. And so this could result in the person feeling a greater degree of emptiness. But you see, underneath there is, the soul is pushing through, and there is a great detachment process going on. And you see, because Paramahansa Yogananda, didn't have his mother. His mother died at an early age, and so the only thing, the only need, the only desire he had left was to reunite or to unite with his divine consciousness, right? And then he was extremely devoted to his teacher, Sri Yukteswar, and so you see how it can play out. And so he did. There was only one desire left in his being, right? To reunite with that which is eternal and which is beyond this ego-centered dimension, let's say. And so that is the core challenge here. The core challenge for Svamsa, as Ernst Wilhelm puts it, I think it's really great, is this: the fact that I need it makes me unhappy. All right. So it's about detaching from needs that are just not able to fulfill you, right? And we're all stuck in that. But slowly but surely, the soul pushes us in the right direction and circumstance to go beyond that. And Svamsa Scorpio, this could be closer to the heart when your Svamsa falls in the sign of Scorpio. And so the challenges concerning this, could play out on a more concrete level in your life. Of course, this is for everyone, right? But there could be an accent on it in this life at time. So look at the aspects to the Swamsha, the benefic aspects, or strong malefics, right? Malefics from their own sign, or Mula Trikona, or exalted, is always a good thing. Look at benefics in great dignity, and you will get an idea about how this plays out in your life, and maybe it shows you that you have some lessons to learn concerning this. We all do. And okay, so I think that's enough. I think I'll give some general meanings now. So Scorpio is a Brahmin sign, right? It's a water sign, it's a moksha sign. It represents the north. It's a fixed sign, right? It's fixed on its course. It's the Tamasic sign, which has to do with density and negating and darkness, which is essential and a very important underlying structure or quality of nature. Within nature, the color associated is reddish brown, slender, hairy. Insect legs are given here also, and it represents the external parts of the genitals, and it's also associated with holes. Okay, so I think I discussed serpents and being related to Vishnu, right? And as I mentioned before, that Vishnu is Neptune in Western astrology, and we know that Neptune is related to the moon, right? It's like, the moon is a personal planet, Neptune is a transpersonal planet, right? So, but it's like Neptune is very closely related to the moon, but it's like working on a completely different level, right? That's why, they refer to being at a higher octave, or and this is commonly known, I think. And so, see, Neptune, points to that the depth of our being, right? Neptune transits can be difficult because Neptune or Vishnu, they dissolve things, right? And by doing that, they preserve things as well. And so, what is dissolved is the form, right? So this can be kind of difficult if, for example, your Venus is have the aspected, let's say, or when the aspect is difficult and Neptune is involved and there's some transits going on with Venus and relationships in your life, played out by the or indicated by the personal planets, and Neptune is involved, this could indicate that depending on the gentle or the hard aspect, which one it is, it can make you feel extremely it can make you feel the depth of your being in a way that you haven't before, right? It can also, in order to do that, it will it's possible that you need to detach from something you thought was the thing, right, the form for you. And so it's showing you to detach from that, right? And Vishnu is all about detaching, all right? Vishnu is the planet associated with astrology also, right? And because Jaimini gives some spiritual advice in his sutras, we could say, and it has to do with the Svamsa and 12th position from the Svamsa. And so it's about letting go of the things that are not real, things that are just that will not stick. And so Scorpio Svamsa is very much about that. Okay, that's enough for Scorpio Svamsa. Let's move on to Sagittarius. And now the effects of the Svamsa falling in Sagittarius. Jaimini says, in Sagittarius, while preceding a fall from a vehicle and a height. And Parashara says, in Sagittarius Navamsha, there is a fall from one's regular course and height, as well as from a vehicle. So we know that Sagittarius is all about setting goals, right? If you look at the symbol there, the arrow is pointed in a certain direction. And so here the soul is learning about one's true purpose, one's true course, we could say. See, because Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, right? And Jupiter is about purpose. Jupiter is about natural law, right? About how things flow naturally. So Jaimini says, while preceding a fall from a vehicle and a height, so this can indicate a physical fall or a crash of some sort, but it can also mean, a fall from position, fall from status, professionally speaking, or in relationships, or in any area of life, a fall is possible. Because here the soul is learning about humility, right? And when we become humble, we find our true purpose, right? This is Jupiter's job. And so this is all, this is what Sagittarius Svamsha is about. So the tendency is to reach for high ideals that the person is just unable to maintain, and thus results in a fall of some sort, right? Now, when you look at the aspects, right, when the Makaraka is healthy and the Svamsa is healthy, this will, indicate a person that is able to make the right choices, that is able to make choices and go after goals that are realistic, right? For example, Jim Morrison had his Svamsa in Sagittarius, and he was a guy that liked to fly high, right, and set very high ideals. If you look at his, the whole personality and the things he stood for. Also, interestingly enough, a fall from a vehicle. So in Vedic astrology, we look at, for the chart for vehicles, to look at how vehicles will play out in our lives. We look at the Shodamsha chart, which is the D16 chart, which is also examined to look at someone's emotional state, emotional contentment, right? And so these things are connected here. Now, some general ideas about Sagittarius sign is that it's a Kshatriya sign, it's a fire sign, right? It's a warrior sign. It's, it represents the East. It's a dual sign, right? So, again, it has, it's setting goals. It's completing some goals and then setting some new goals. Fire sign. The color associated here is gold. It's even-bodied. Then also the thighs are associated, and then also barracks. Okay, so pretty short for Sagittarius Swamsha. Let's move on to Capricorn. And now the effects of the Swamsha falling in Capricorn. Jaimini says, aquatic animals, things moving in the air, planets, birds, demons, villages, kapha, itches, defects, guilt, and tumors, joints, in Capricorn. That's a mouthful, right? And then Parashara says, in Capricorn Navamsha, animals living in water and birds cause fear. There will certainly be gains of shells, pearls, and edible vegetables produced in water. Aquatic animals are symbolic for emotional battles and frustrated feelings, and as well they can represent emotional denial that can lead to escapist or addictive tendencies. Now, things moving in the air, planets have to do with destiny and faith, and so Capricorn is the most fated sign according to Jaimini. Obviously, the planets represent powerful karmic influences, right? And because Capricorn is such a decisive and willful sign, meaning that they can be very much attached to that, to their will and to their decisiveness, that it becomes hard, right, to get a proper understanding of concepts like faith and free will and destiny. And so this is being highlighted in Capricorn Swamsha. Birds represent the mental thoughts, that can lead to frustration, or that can make, even can make life intolerable. Also, they can represent spirits, which have, which could have to do with psychic abilities and psychic disorders when afflicted. And then demons, we already discussed, has to do with persons that can be psychologically sensitive, right? Now, the lesson here about thinking and thoughts and the birds, mentioned here, is that the person needs to learn that their thinking, their thoughts, and their needs, underlying needs, are the cause or are the root for their frustrations, irritations, and feelings of unhappiness. And it's about learning how to overcome that, right? How to come to grips with that. We see the opposite sign is Cancer, right? Cancer had to do with becoming emotionally balanced and mature. And so, you know, Capricorn has a tendency to hold up things, right? To get stuck in certain patterns, to feel stuck at certain places on their path. And that's, you know, Gemini says villages, right? And so villages represent this. They can feel this unsatisfied, you know, where they're at in the place where they're were born, or their life path. And so, you know, sometimes when, you know, afflicted, and Capricorn represents this. So also they have to learn how to become, you know, they just need to feel comfortable, learn how to feel comfortable what they say and what they do, right? And so there's a lot of weight concerning Capricorn, and because of that, there's a great potential to go into the root of suffering, right, and to go beyond that, to overcome suffering. Also, tumors and guilt, right? They can feel guilty for no reason, and tumors have to do with also, again, destiny and fate. Is that also the realization that, and the fact that life has so much to do with burning our physical karmas, right? And because of that, one becomes very humble and, you know, is able to go into the root of the suffering and ultimately to kill the ego, right? And or to put it in the right place, we could say, to put it in the proper place, right? So also itches are mentioned, so we already addressed this. So this had to do with you know, becoming attached to too many unimportant ideas that can lead to frustrations. Also opinions like this is how the world should be, this is how it not should be, and, you know, things like that can result in mental irritations and frustrations. Also kapha has to do with you know, overweight, and it's about, you know, emotional, could have to do with emotional stagnation. And now it sounds a little dramatic here, Capricorn, but Gemini is pretty clear about it, and so there's a lot of karma involved with Capricorn. And so, but again, great spiritual potential and great potential for growth, deeply, right? And then tumors again, right? As I mentioned, the physical karmas being burned through Svamsa Capricorn and joint problems. Now, some general ideas about Capricorn sign is that it's a Sudra sign, it's a laborer sign, it has to do with performing service. It's an earth sign, right? Represents the south. It's a movable sign, so it has to do with action, right? Jesus was a Capricorn, right? So that he had some great work to do, right? And it's a Tamasic planet, so again, it has to do with density. It's ruled by Saturn, right? So you can see the whole death connotation and the ego death and being very strong here. And now we see Pluto is now in Capricorn, and it's such an intense time. The last years, right, have been so transforming. Old structures are getting, you know, there's so much resistance from those structures, and it's getting piece by piece. It's getting, you know, taken apart. Large bodied, it's associated with watery places, represents the knees, and also it is associated with mountains. So if your Swamsha falls in Capricorn, your Atmakaraka, just look at the influences to the Atmakaraka. When, you know, there's a healthy Atmakaraka indication, it gives the potential for a lot of growth. And now if there's, you know, difficult aspects to it, it gives a lot of potential for growth as well, but it's going to be more challenges, right? It's going to be a little more tough maybe. And so it's a very, you know, it's the most fated sign, and things can, it's like, you know, Scorpio, it can go either way, right? It's extremes. So the further we get into the zodiac, the more impersonal things become, and the more there is, you know, the greater the opportunities also for growth on a beyond the personal level, we could say, and so it's more impersonal signs, right? So I think that's enough for Capricorn Svamsa. Let's move on to Aquarius. And now the effects of the Svamsa falling in Aquarius. Gemini says, maker of ponds, tanks, things related to shores in Aquarius. And Parashara says, and in Aquarius Navamsha, know that the native is involved with tanks, etc. Now, tanks here refer to humanitarian activities. Now, the core challenge for Aquarius Svamsa is being true to one's individuality no matter what happens. And it's about finding a connection to humanity. So to become a true humanitarian. Now, in order to do that, the person needs to become psychologically and emotionally balanced, healthy, right? Integer. I've mentioned this for other signs as well. And yes, there is a lot of water flowing through the zodiac, right? To become a true individual, undivided, right? It's a huge thing. See, we can look at it from this perspective. The soul evolves from stone to plant to animal to human being, right? So there is an individualization process going on, but that process, in the process, we tend to become more separate, right? See, we can become so detached from our environment, right? From our soul, from our path, from our true purpose, from our divine nature, that things start falling apart, right? That the person, has to deal with personality insecurities, right? That there's overcompensation in trying to express uniqueness, for example, right? When afflicted or, in the early initial stages. So Aquarius Swamtra is about reconnecting with the source, right? And I've seen, in a lot of cases it means also to connect with emotions, with their emotional bodies, right? It is about becoming secure in oneself. So it's about accepting one's strengths and weaknesses, right? One's pluses and minuses, and truly and completely accepting those, right? Not looking for confirmation or validation too much, right? And so, see, when we look at points like this, these energetically charged points in the horoscope, like the Atmakaraka, right? The soul producer, right? Sounds, it's charged, right? So it is the planet on which the Gemini analysis is based. So when we look at its placement in the Navamsha, right, and the aspects to it, see, it's, as I said, it's like a gateway. It acts like a gateway, like an energetic point from where we can start analyzing the chart, right? And if you talk to people about these placements, then it tends to play out more often than not that the person can relate to this on a concrete level, right? They really experience this. So look at these points like Atmakaraka and Swamsha from that perspective, right? So you can look at all Swamshas and the meanings of the Swamshas and find meaning, right, that will apply, to your life. But I just wanted to mention this, that it's not that fixed, right? But it is an energetically charged point. It's a magnetic point from where we can, start opening up possibilities, right? It's an energetic gateway to open up the channel and for possibilities to be able to, flow in, we could say. So Aquarius Svamsa, you see, Aquarius is such an impersonal sign, right? It needs to learn how to express this, this individuality on a personal level as well, right? It's opposite Leo, right? Opposites always need to learn from each other, right? So you can look at the influences to your Swamsha again by Rashi aspect, right? And see how this plays out in your life, and you can, leave a comment in the comment section, as we can, this way, because there's a lot of people watching this channel, we can do some research concerning this. Some general ideas about Aquarius sign is that it's a Vaishya sign, right? It's a merchant sign, that's what it means. It's an air sign, so it has to do with intellect and ideas and concepts, and interactions, right? It's very social. It's a tamasic sign, so again it has to do with attachment, and it's about, tamasic is about negating things, and more dark things. In inertia is also associated, and which is important to facilitate evolution, or to it's an important aspect of evolution. Represents the west. It's a fixed sign, right? It's medium bodied. Represents the ankles, also the water pots. Represents deep water, again water, right? And which I think is interesting, because as Aquarius is the sign of the higher mental thinking, right? It can be so far out, but so detached from their emotional state, which anchors you, which is the fuel for opening the heart and living from that space or dimension, we could say. And the color associated is deep brown. So I think that's enough for Aquarius Swamsha. Let's move on to the last one, Pisces. And now the effects of the Swamsha falling in Pisces. Jaimini says, in Pisces, elevation, perpetual dharma, and kaivalyam. Kaivalyam means liberation, means moksha, from the things that bind us. And Parashara says, the Karaka in Pisces Navamsha indicates that the native has the good fortune of liberation, Dviya Sattama. Pisces Swamsha indicates a person that is firm in his or her duty, a person that performs good deeds, and a person that is high-minded. Pisces is the 12th sign of the zodiac, right? And has to do with completions. Completing a particular phase of evolution and growing into another. So it has to do with elevation as well. See, it's about maintaining what Jaimini says, perpetual dharma, right? And that this is elevating, right? So keeping steady on the course, right? Being flexible on the course, steady on the course nonetheless, to evolve into higher states. It's about growing into surrendering to a higher will. And because of that, there is great spiritual rewards, seen from Swamsha Pisces. Especially when the Atmakaraka is healthy, when the Rashi aspects to the Atmakaraka are beneficial, we could say, and the Swamsha is nicely aspected. It can indicate great potential for spiritual growth. Swamsha Pisces has the most potential for spiritual growth, and you can see it play out either way. Sometimes people, because we're all sensitive, but some people are more sensitive than others, and we all react on cosmic influences, right? And so people that have the sensitivity and are not able to channel that energy properly could, go into abusive substances, behavior, or escapism, and things like that. So I also want to mention that, so liberation, right, the completions, the 12th sign, liberation, is associated here, but it doesn't necessarily have to play out on a spiritual level, right? It could mean a person that is dedicated to a humanitarian cause, and like all sorts of right movements, or fighting for the rights of animals, etc. Okay, but I've seen it play out many times, that people who are highly into elevating consciousness, right, is seen from Pisces Svamsa. See, the first planet is the sun, right, and the sun is a karaka, or an indicator of the natal chart, the Rashi chart, the D1 chart, right? And the ninth planet is Ketu, the south node of the moon, right? It is the ninth planet in astrology. And so, as I mentioned, Ketu is, has to do with moksha. It's the liberator, right? It is an extremely narrow graha. So planet, an astrological planet. It's an eclipse point, but it's a graha. So things can become so narrow that the only thing the person wants to do is find God, or they can become so narrow that that they become depressed, because there's no way out, we could say. So, but the point I wanted to make is that the Rashi chart is, the first planet is the sun, right? Natural indicator of self. So if you see a Rashi aspect of the sun to the Atmakaraka or the Svamsa, that's considered a positive thing, because it is an indicator of self also. And Ketu, the ninth planet, if we look at the ninth divisional chart, right, it has to do with our purpose. It represents the ashram we belong to, right? It's our inner purpose, the things we want to go for. And so the first divisional chart, which is the Rashi chart or the natal chart, and the ninth divisional chart are considered the two most important charts, right? So here again we see Ketu involved as the ninth planet, and it has to do with completions and elevations. And Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, which has to do with our purpose. Right. Now Pisces is a water sign. It's a moksha sign, as I mentioned. It represents the north. It's a dual sign. It's a sattvic sign. Right? So all makes sense here, right? It's medium-bodied. The color associated is gray. Right? And at the feet, I already mentioned, it's also associated with seas and oceans. Right? Now, just a little word about Ketu, right? So, Rahu and Ketu are eclipse points, right? They're not actual, embodied planets, but they are eclipse points. They are, caused by the interaction of the path of the sun with that of the moon, right? And so they represent the path of our consciousness. That's why Rahu and Ketu are, extremely important and so deep. To analyze, it's sometimes you can study Rahu and Ketu for 10 years and just you can find more and more and more things about them. Sometimes because they're eclipse points, they can be so confusing, right? And so if we talk about liberation, if we talk about spirituality, if we talk about anything metaphysical, it is can be very confusing, right? So look at your Svamsa, look at your Atmakaraka, look at the aspects, the Rashi aspects. Don't look at the conjunctions, as I mentioned. Don't look at the dignity of the Atmakaraka or the Svamsa. Just look at the aspects to it to consider, what we've discussed here in this series. If things are heavily aspected, all right, by malefics or bad dignity planets, don't freak out. It's just, as I mentioned before, it's just showing you where you need to grow the most. And if there's benefic aspects to this, most of the time it will play out like this, like a mixed influence. Then it represents great potential, right, to grow even further and into what your soul really wants in this lifetime, right? And And so even if there's malefic aspects to it, the soul will push through anyhow, anyway, right? And so it's about willingness, the willingness to open up, perspective, to open up for what, the higher will, we could say, right, is asking from you. And you will see that in the end, things always work out, okay? No matter the troubles and the difficulties and the suffering and the pain involved, right? See, physical incarnation, as I mentioned before, is the gift, right? It is the soul that heals through the physical incarnation, through the body, right? It is able to pick it up and let it go, okay? So that's why we're here for, in my opinion, is to heal deeply and to evolve into more in higher states of consciousness, of higher states of awareness, right? And so you see the body itself is unparalleled, right? It's not, it doesn't know death, the body doesn't know it's alive even. It doesn't know if it's death or alive. It just is. It's the product of millions of years of evolution, and it is just this little ego thing, right, which is important to, make sure that we survive in this reality, but it needs to be put in the right place, and we're all learning that, right? And so I think Pisces is a sign, it's completions, it can point us in the right direction and show us our divine consciousness and the divine will, right? Which is not some flaky thing, it's a deep reality of how things actually are. And again, this is in my experience, it's in my feeling. So I hope you enjoyed this series, and you can leave comments in the comments section, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye.